The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors. William stood in his study, staring at the official document that would change everything. The royal seal gleamed at the bottom of the page, making the words feel even more final. His hands trembled slightly as he read the same paragraph for the 5th time. Kate entered the room quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea on a silver tray. She had learned to read her husband's moods over the years, and today something was different. The tension in his shoulders, the way he held his jaw tight, the distant look in his eyes, all signs that something significant was weighing on his mind. "You've been in here for hours," she said softly, setting the tray down on his desk. "The children are asking where you are." William looked up at her, and Kate immediately saw the pain in his eyes. In all their years together, through public scrutiny, family tragedies, and royal responsibilities, she had rarely seen him look so vulnerable. He seemed to age 10 years in that single moment. "Sit down, Kate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's something I need to tell you." Kate felt her heart skip a beat. The formal tone, the serious expression, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes, it all pointed to news that would shatter their carefully constructed world. She settled into the leather chair across from his desk, wrapping her hands around the warm teacup for comfort. William took a deep breath and began to explain. The Queen had made a decision that would require him to take on a role that meant extended separation from his family. It wasn't a choice, it was a duty that came with being second in line to the throne. The assignment would last 18 months, possibly longer, and it would take him far from London, far from Kate and their children. As he spoke, Kate watched his face change. The man she married, the one who laughed with their children every morning at breakfast, who held her hand during difficult royal engagements, who whispered jokes in her ear during boring state dinners. That man seemed to be disappearing before her eyes, replaced by someone carrying an impossible burden. "When?" Kate asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her chest. 6 weeks, William replied. "The arrangements are already being made. The palace staff, the security detail, everything is being coordinated. There's no way around it, Kate. I've tried to find alternatives, but—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Kate could see the weight of duty pressing down on him, the same weight that had shaped his entire life. She knew this wasn't what he wanted, but she also understood that refusing wasn't an option for someone in his position. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Kate stared out the window at the gardens where their children played every afternoon. George would be devastated. Charlotte would cry for weeks. Louis was still so young. Would he even remember his father when he returned? "What will we tell them?" Kate asked, finally voicing the question that terrified her most. William's composure finally cracked. He buried his face in his hands, and Kate could see his shoulders shaking. In all their years together, she had only seen him cry a handful of times. At their wedding, when each of their children was born, and at his grandmother's funeral. This was different, though. This wasn't tears of joy or even grief. This was the sound of a man being torn apart by circumstances beyond his control. Kate rose from her chair and walked around the desk. She placed her hands on William's shoulders, feeling the tension that had been building there for weeks. He looked up at her with red-rimmed eyes, and she saw not the future king, but the frightened boy who had lost his mother too young and now faced losing precious time with his own children. "We'll figure it out," Kate said, though she wasn't sure how. "We always do." William pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. They stood there in the morning light, clinging to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. Kate could feel his heart beating rapidly against her chest, could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the fear that seemed to surround them both. "I don't know how to do this," William whispered into her hair. "I don't know how to leave you all behind." Kate pulled back to look at him. Despite her own fear, despite the tears threatening to spill from her eyes, she knew she had to be strong. Someone had to be the anchor in this storm, and it was clear that today that someone was her. "You're not leaving us behind," she said firmly. "Distance doesn't change what we are. It doesn't change how much we love you or how proud we are of you. This is temporary, William. Just temporary." William searched her face, looking for any sign that she was just saying what he needed to hear. But Kate's eyes held steady, filled with the same determination that had helped her navigate the complexities of royal life from the very beginning. She meant every word. Outside the study door, they could hear the sound of small feet running down the hallway, followed by the children's laughter. Life was continuing around them, innocent and unaware of how everything was about to change. In 6 weeks, those sounds would echo through empty rooms, and Kate would have to find a way to fill the silence. The official document still lay on the desk between them, its formal language unable to capture the human cost of duty and service. As Kate looked at it, she realized this was just the beginning. The real challenge wouldn't be the announcement or even the goodbye. It would be all the days and nights that came after. The weeks that followed felt like living in a house made of glass where every moment was precious and fragile. Kate found herself memorizing the smallest details. The way William hummed while shaving in the morning. How he always checked on the children one last time before bed. The sound of his laughter echoing through the halls when George told one of his silly jokes. Breaking the news to the children had been the hardest conversation of their lives. They had gathered in the family room on a Sunday afternoon, with the autumn sun streaming through the windows and the children sprawled on the carpet with their toys. William's voice had shaken as he explained that Daddy would need to go away for work, for a very long time. George, now old enough to understand the weight of royal duty, had tried to be brave. At 10 years old, he was already showing signs of the composure expected of a future king. But Kate saw through his careful mask to the confused little boy underneath. "Will you miss my birthday?" he had asked quietly, and William's sharp intake of breath told Kate that he hadn't even considered all the milestones he would miss. Charlotte had been inconsolable. At 8, she was Daddy's little princess, and the thought of him being gone for so long was incomprehensible. She had thrown herself into William's arms and sobbed, begging him not to go. "Can't someone else do it?" She had cried, and Kate had to leave the room for a moment to compose herself. Little Louis, barely 5, didn't fully grasp what was happening, but he sensed the sadness in the house. He had started following William everywhere, clinging to his father's hand and asking repeatedly if Daddy was going to come back. The palace staff had begun preparing for William's departure with their usual efficiency, but Kate could see the sadness in their eyes too. Many of them had watched William grow up, had celebrated his wedding to Kate, had been there when each of the children was born. This wasn't just a royal assignment. It was a family being torn apart. Maria, their longtime nanny, had quietly approached Kate one evening after putting the children to bed. "Your Royal Highness," she had said, her voice heavy with emotion, "if there's anything I can do to help during this time." Kate had smiled gratefully. The support of the staff would be crucial in the months ahead. They would need to become an even tighter family unit to fill the enormous gap that William's absence would create. As the departure date grew closer, William threw himself into spending time with his family with an intensity that was both beautiful and heartbreaking to watch. He canceled several royal engagements to attend Charlotte's school play, spent hours in the garden with Louis building a treehouse they both knew he wouldn't be there to see completed, and had long talks with George about responsibility and looking after his mother and siblings. Kate watched these interactions with a mixture of pride and sorrow. William was trying to compress months of fathering into a few short weeks, creating enough memories to sustain them all through the separation. She saw him taking mental photographs of everything: bedtime stories, family dinners, quiet moments in the nursery. One evening, Kate found William in Charlotte's room long after the little girl had fallen asleep. He was sitting beside her bed, just watching her breathe, his hand gently smoothing her hair. When he noticed Kate in the doorway, he tried to smile, but his eyes were filled with tears. "I keep thinking about all the nights I won't be here to check on them," he whispered. "What if Charlotte has a nightmare and I'm not here? What if Louis gets sick? What if George needs to talk about something important?" Kate sat down beside him on Charlotte's small chair. "Then they'll come to me," she said softly, "and I'll do my best to be both of us until you come home." The weight of that responsibility was already pressing down on her shoulders. Kate had always been an active mother, involved in every aspect of their children's lives, but the thought of shouldering the entire burden alone was daunting. She would need to be everything: the disciplinarian and the comforter, the playmate and the authority figure, the one who kissed scraped knees and the one who helped with homework. William reached for her hand. "I don't know how you're so strong about this," he said. "I feel like I'm falling apart." Kate squeezed his fingers. The truth was, she wasn't feeling strong at all. Late at night, when the house was quiet and William was sleeping, she allowed herself to cry. She mourned for the family dinners they wouldn't share, the holidays that would feel incomplete, the everyday moments that made their life together so precious. But during the day, she forced herself to focus on practical matters. She met with the children's teachers to explain the situation and arrange for extra support during the difficult transition. She coordinated with William's private secretary to ensure regular video calls could be scheduled around the children's routines. She even arranged for a family portrait to be taken, so they would have a recent photograph to treasure. The media had begun to speculate about William's upcoming assignment. Though the palace had released only the most basic information, Kate found herself scrutinizing every news report, worried about how much the public attention would add to the children's stress. The last thing they needed was photographers camping outside their school, or reporters approaching them with questions about their father's absence. One afternoon, while William was having a private meeting with his father about the assignment, Kate sat in their bedroom looking through photo albums. Years of family memories surrounded her, holidays, birthdays, quiet moments at home. She paused at a picture from their last family vacation, just 2 months earlier. They had all been so happy, so carefree. None of them could have imagined how quickly everything would change. The sound of William's footsteps in the hallway brought her back to the present. When he entered the bedroom, his face was grave, and Kate knew the meeting hadn't gone well. The weight of expectation, the impossibility of the situation, the knowledge that duty must come before personal happiness. It was all there in his expression. 3 more weeks, he said simply. And Kate felt her heart break a little more. 3 weeks to hold on to normal life, to pretend that this wasn't really happening, to store up enough love and laughter to last through the long months ahead. The final week arrived like an unwelcome storm. Every moment felt charged with emotion. Every conversation carried extra weight. Kate found herself studying William's face during breakfast, memorizing the way he smiled at Charlotte's chatter about school, how he helped Louis with his shoelaces, the patient way he answered George's endless questions about everything from dinosaurs to airplanes. William had become almost desperate in his attempts to create lasting memories. He recorded bedtime stories for each child, his voice warm and familiar as he read their favorite books. Kate watched from the doorway as he sat in the nursery with an old recording device, trying to capture not just the words but the love behind them. Once upon a time, he began, reading Charlotte's favorite fairy tale. There was a brave princess who could overcome any challenge. His voice caught slightly on the word brave, and Kate saw him pause to collect himself before continuing. The palace staff moved around them with quiet efficiency, preparing for William's departure, while trying to maintain some sense of normalcy for the family. But there was a heaviness in the air that no one could ignore. Even the dog seemed to sense something was wrong, following William more closely than usual, as if they too understood that change was coming. Kate threw herself into planning. If she couldn't stop this from happening, she could at least prepare for it. She created detailed schedules for the children, coordinating their activities to minimize the empty spaces where William's presence would be most missed. She arranged for extra support from their extended family, visits from William's father and stepmother, time with Kate's parents, anything to fill the house with love and distraction, but no amount of planning could prepare her for the small, heartbreaking moments. Like when Louis asked if he could save his Halloween candy for Daddy to try when he came home, or when Charlotte started making a countdown calendar, marking off the days until William's return. George had become unusually quiet, carrying himself with a seriousness that seemed far too heavy for a 10-year-old's shoulders. He's trying to be the man of the house already, William said one evening after George had insisted on checking all the doors before bedtime, a job that had always been his father's. I hate that he feels that responsibility. Kate watched their eldest son through the window as he played in the garden with his siblings, and she could see it too. The way George was already changing, stepping into a role he shouldn't have to fill for years to come. The weight of being the future king was already shaping him, and William's absence would only make that burden heavier. The media attention intensified as news of William's assignment leaked to the press. Photographers gathered outside the palace gates, and Kate found herself carefully planning the children's movements to avoid unnecessary exposure. The last thing she wanted was pictures of their sadness splashed across newspaper front pages, but the public response surprised her. Letters began arriving at the palace, thousands of them, from families who understood separation, from military wives, from anyone who had ever had to say goodbye to someone they loved. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, and Kate found herself reading some of the letters aloud to William in the evenings. "Your Royal Highness," one letter began. "My husband served overseas for 2 years when our children were small. I want you to know that love doesn't diminish with distance, and children are stronger than we think. Your family will survive this, and you'll all be closer for having overcome it together." William listened to these letters with tears in his eyes. The knowledge that others had faced similar challenges and emerged stronger gave him some comfort. But it didn't ease the immediate pain of what lay ahead. 3 days before his departure, William made a decision that surprised everyone. He asked for a private family day. No royal duties, no meetings, no staff. Just the 5 of them together for one last normal day. They spent the morning in their pajamas, having breakfast in bed and watching cartoons with the children. William helped Kate make pancakes in the kitchen while the children sat at the counter, flour somehow ending up on everyone's faces. For a few hours it felt like any other weekend morning, and Kate allowed herself to pretend that Monday would bring just another ordinary week. In the afternoon, they walked through Hyde Park together, something they hadn't done as a complete family in months. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, and the children ran ahead, playing and laughing while William and Kate walked hand in hand behind them. To anyone watching, they looked like any other family enjoying a day out together, but Kate could feel William's hand trembling in hers, could see the way he was trying to imprint every detail in his memory. When Charlotte ran back to show them a particularly beautiful leaf she had found, William knelt down to examine it with the serious attention usually reserved for state documents. "This is the most beautiful leaf I've ever seen," he told her solemnly, and Charlotte beamed with pride, tucking it carefully into her pocket to save forever. That evening, they had dinner by candlelight in the family dining room. The children were unusually well behaved, as if they too sensed the significance of the moment. George helped serve the food, Charlotte arranged the flowers on the table, and Louis insisted on saying a very long grace that included thanks for Daddy being the best daddy in the whole world. After dinner, they gathered in the sitting room for family games. William played with an enthusiasm that bordered on manic, as if he could store up enough laughter to last through the separation.
Kate watched him chase Louis around the room,
tickling the little boy until he dissolved into giggles, and she felt her heart breaking and healing simultaneously. When it was time for bed, William tucked each child in with extra care. Kate heard him through the door of Charlotte's room, promising to call every day, assuring her that distance couldn't change how much he loved her. The conversation with George was longer and more serious, filled with talks about responsibility and taking care of the family. Finally, William came to their own bedroom, where Kate was waiting. They didn't speak for a long time, just held each other in the lamplight, listening to the sounds of the house settling around them. In 2 days, Kate would be listening to these sounds alone, and the silence would feel deafening. "Thank you," William whispered finally. "For what?" Kate asked. "For being strong enough for both of us. For making today perfect. For loving me enough to let me go." Kate pulled back to look at him. "I'm not letting you go," she said firmly. "I'm holding on so tight that no amount of distance can break us apart. Don't you ever forget that?" The morning of William's departure dawned gray and cold, as if the weather itself was mourning. Kate woke before her alarm, finding William already awake beside her, staring at the ceiling. Neither of them had slept much during the night. Every time one of them drifted off, they would wake with a start, remembering what day it was. "The children?" William asked softly. "Still sleeping," Kate replied, though she could hear small movements from down the hall. Charlotte had been having nightmares all week, and Louis had taken to crawling into their bed in the early morning hours. Only George seemed to be sleeping soundly, but Kate suspected he was staying in his room out of a sense of duty rather than actual rest. They lay there in the pre-dawn darkness, holding hands and listening to the sounds of the palace coming to life around them. The staff would already be making final preparations, loading luggage, coordinating security, checking and double-checking every detail of William's departure. But for now, in this quiet moment, they were just a husband and wife facing an impossible goodbye. The children appeared at their bedroom door one by one, as if drawn by an invisible magnet. Charlotte came first, her hair messy from sleep and her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched in her arms. George followed, trying to look brave but unable to hide the worry in his eyes. Louis brought up the rear, still in his pajamas and dragging his blanket behind him. Without a word, they all climbed into the big bed, creating a family cocoon under the covers. William gathered them close, one child on each side and Louis curled up on his chest. For half an hour, they just stayed like that, breathing together, memorizing the feeling of being complete. Kate watched William's face as he held their children, seeing him try to absorb every detail, the weight of Louis on his chest, the way Charlotte's hair tickled his arm, how George leaned against his shoulder with unconscious trust. These were the moments he would replay in his mind during the long months ahead. Breakfast was a quiet affair. The children picked at their food while William tried to maintain cheerful conversation, asking about their plans for the day and reminding them about upcoming school events he would miss. Kate saw through his forced optimism, but she appreciated his effort to keep things normal for as long as possible. "Will you call us tonight?" Charlotte asked for the 100th time. "Every night," William promised, "and every morning too if the time difference allows it." "What if you forget?" Louis worried. William knelt down to meet his youngest son's eyes. "I could never forget to call you, never. Do you know why?" Louis shook his head. "Because talking to you and Mama and Charlotte and George will be the best part of every single day I'm away. I'll probably call you even when you're sleeping just to hear your voices." Louis seemed satisfied with this answer, but Kate could see the confusion still lingering in his young face. At 5, the concept of months was abstract. He wouldn't truly understand William's absence until the days stretched into weeks. The time came too quickly. William's security detail arrived, followed by the official cars that would take him to the airport. Kate watched through the window as serious men in dark suits conducted final security checks, their efficiency a stark reminder of the dangerous nature of William's assignment. The family gathered in the main entrance hall for their private goodbye. Kate had specifically requested no photographers, no official send-off. This moment belonged to them alone. William knelt down and gathered all 3 children in his arms one final time. "I need you to take care of each other while I'm gone," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I especially need you to take care of Mama. Can you do that for me?" George nodded solemnly. "I'll help with everything," he promised, and Kate saw William's eyes fill with tears at his son's serious tone. Charlotte threw her arms around William's neck and held on tight. "I don't want you to go," she whispered. "I don't want to go either, sweetheart," William replied honestly. "But sometimes grown-ups have to do hard things even when we don't want to. That's what makes us brave." "Are you brave, Daddy?" Louis asked. William looked at his youngest child, then at Kate, then at all of them together. "I'm trying to be," he said. "But do you know what makes me feel braver than anything?" The children shook their heads. "Knowing that I have the most amazing family in the world waiting for me to come home. That makes me feel like I can do anything." The final hug seemed to last forever and not nearly long enough. Kate watched William memorize each child's face, whispering private words of love and encouragement. When he finally stood up, she could see that his composure was hanging by a thread. Then it was her turn. Kate had prepared herself for this moment, had practiced staying strong, but nothing could have prepared her for the actual goodbye. William pulled her into his arms, and for a moment they forgot about everything else. The watching staff, the waiting cars, the children who needed them to be brave. "I love you," William whispered into her hair. "I love you more than I've ever loved anything in my life." "I love you too," Kate replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "Come home to us, William. Come home safe." They held each other for one last moment, trying to communicate 18 months of love in a single embrace. Kate could feel William's heart beating against hers, could smell his familiar cologne, could feel the strength in his arms that had held her through so many difficult moments over the years. When they finally pulled apart, William cupped her face in his hands. "You're going to be an amazing mother to them while I'm gone," he said. "You already are." Kate nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady if she spoke. William picked up his personal bag, a small piece of luggage that contained photos of the family, letters from the children, and a few personal items to make his temporary quarters feel less foreign. The official luggage had already been loaded into the cars. He walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one last time. Kate and the children stood together in the doorway, a united front despite the tears on all their faces. "This isn't goodbye," William said firmly. "This is see you soon." "See you soon, Daddy," the children chorused, though their voices were small and uncertain. William smiled at them one last time, then turned and walked out the door. Kate heard the car doors close, heard the engine start, and watched through the window as the motorcade pulled away from the palace. The children pressed against the glass, waving until the cars disappeared from sight. Then the house fell silent, except for the sound of Charlotte's quiet sobs and the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Kate gathered her children close, holding them as they cried, letting her own tears fall freely for the first time. They stood there together in the empty hallway, 4 people who suddenly felt incomplete, learning how to be a family with a crucial piece missing. The first month without William felt like learning to breathe underwater. Every routine they had built as a family needed to be reconstructed around his absence. Kate found herself reaching for the phone to share small moments with him. Louis's first successful bike ride without training wheels, Charlotte's proudly displayed art project, George's excellent marks on a mathematics test, only to remember the time difference and realize he might be sleeping or in meetings. The children reacted to their father's absence in different ways. George threw himself into his studies with an intensity that worried Kate. At 10, he was already showing signs of the burden he would carry as future king, but now he seemed determined to prove himself worthy of his father's trust. He helped with his younger siblings without being asked, checked on Kate constantly, and had started reading the newspapers, trying to understand the work that had taken his father away. Charlotte became clingy and emotional. She had always been Daddy's little princess, and his absence left a void that no amount of attention from Kate could fill. She started having trouble sleeping, often appearing at Kate's bedroom door in the middle of the night asking if they could call Daddy just to make sure he was okay. Kate's heart broke every time she had to explain that it was the middle of the night where Daddy was, and they couldn't wake him up. Louis seemed to handle it best. But Kate suspected that was because he didn't fully understand the permanence of the situation. He still set a place for William at dinner and saved interesting toys to show him when he gets home from work. His innocent questions, "Is Daddy coming home for lunch today?" were like small daggers to Kate's heart. The video calls were both a blessing and a torture. Technology allowed them to see William's face, to share their days with him, but it also highlighted the distance between them. The slight delay in the connection meant conversations felt stilted. William looked tired and strained, though he tried to hide it when talking to the children. Kate could see the loneliness in his eyes, the way he stared hungrily at their faces through the screen. "Tell me everything," William would say during their calls. "I want to hear about every moment of your day." Kate would share the small details, how Louis had insisted on wearing his Superman costume to the grocery store, how Charlotte had helped her bake cookies for the staff, how George had asked thoughtful questions about current events. But she couldn't convey the texture of their days, the way Louis's laugh echoed through the house, or how Charlotte hummed while doing her homework. The most difficult calls were the ones where the children were upset. When Charlotte had a meltdown about a friend's birthday party she couldn't attend, William watched helplessly through the screen as Kate tried to comfort their daughter. The frustration on his face was evident. He wanted to hold Charlotte, to smooth her hair and whisper reassurances, but all he could do was watch. "I should be there," he said to Kate after the children had gone to bed following a particularly difficult day. "When George fell off his bike today, I should have been there to check his scraped knee. When Charlotte couldn't find her favorite book, I should have been there to help look for it." Kate understood his frustration because she felt it too. The weight of handling everything alone was enormous. She was used to sharing parenting decisions with William, to having someone to tag in when she was exhausted or overwhelmed. Now every decision, every crisis, every bedtime battle was hers to handle alone. But she also saw strength emerging in places she hadn't expected. The children were learning to comfort each other in new ways. When Charlotte had a nightmare, George would appear at her bedside with a glass of water and a story. When Louis missed his father particularly acutely, Charlotte would draw pictures of the whole family together and tell him elaborate stories about all the fun they would have when Daddy came home. Kate found herself growing stronger too. She had always been capable, but William's absence forced her to discover reserves of patience and resilience she hadn't known she possessed. She became expert at reading bedtime stories with different voices for each character, at settling disputes between siblings, at being both the disciplinarian and the comforter. The staff at the palace were incredibly supportive, but Kate was careful not to rely on them too heavily. She wanted the children to know that their mother was the constant in their lives, the one they could count on no matter what. Maria, their nanny, provided invaluable support, but Kate made sure she was the one putting the children to bed, helping with homework, and handling the important conversations. Letters and packages arrived regularly from William. He sent postcards from different locations, though the exact details of where he was remained classified. The children treasured these glimpses into their father's world. William had a gift for making even the most mundane details sound exciting, describing the food he ate, the interesting people he met, the different landscapes he encountered. For Kate, he sent longer letters filled with private thoughts and feelings he couldn't express during their video calls. These letters became her lifeline, proof that despite the distance, their connection remained strong. He wrote about missing the sound of her voice first thing in the morning, about lying awake at night thinking about the family dinners they weren't sharing, about the constant ache of being so far from the people he loved most. "I carry pictures of all of you everywhere," he wrote in one letter. "The other day, someone saw the photo on my desk, the one from our last family vacation, and said we looked like the happiest family in the world. I realize that despite everything we're going through, we still are. Distance can't change that." Kate kept these letters in a special box by her bedside, reading them when the loneliness felt overwhelming. They reminded her that this separation was temporary, that William was fighting just as hard as she was to keep their family bond strong across the miles. Public interest in the family situation remained high, but Kate was grateful for the respectful distance most of the media maintained. Occasionally, photographers would try to capture pictures of the children looking sad or upset, seeking to create a narrative of abandonment or family crisis. Kate worked with the palace press office to protect the children from intrusive coverage, while still acknowledging the public's legitimate interest in the royal family. One particularly touching moment came when a group of military families sent care packages to the palace. These families understood the challenges of separation, and their gifts, books, toys, and handwritten notes of encouragement, meant more to Kate than any official gesture of support. She read some of the notes to the children, helping them understand that they weren't alone in facing this challenge. "Other families miss their daddies too," Charlotte said after hearing one of the letters. "But they all came back, right?" "They all came back," Kate confirmed, and for the first time in weeks, Charlotte smiled with genuine happiness rather than just politeness. As the first month turned into the second, Kate began to see signs that they were adapting. The children still missed William desperately, but they were finding ways to include him in their daily lives despite his physical absence. They had started leaving him voice messages when he couldn't take their calls, creating a digital diary of their days that he could listen to when time allowed. Kate realized that while this separation was the hardest thing their family had ever faced, it was also teaching them something valuable about the strength of love and commitment. They were learning that families aren't just about being in the same place. They're about choosing to stay connected even when distance tries to pull them apart. 6 months into William's absence, their new normal had become just that, normal. The sharp edge of constant grief had softened into a manageable ache, and the family had found rhythms that worked around the empty space William had left behind. But that didn't mean the challenges had ended. They had simply evolved. Kate had become a master of time zone mathematics, calculating when to call William based on his constantly changing schedule and location. She kept a world clock by her bedside and had taught the children to think about where Daddy might be when they went to sleep each night. "Daddy's having lunch while we're having dinner," became a common refrain at their dinner table. The video calls had taken on a sacred quality in their household. Nothing was allowed to interfere with their scheduled conversations with William. Not social invitations, not royal duties, not even emergencies unless they were truly serious. Kate had learned to prepare for these calls like important meetings, gathering the children's artwork, school reports, and any special moments they wanted to share. George had grown visibly in the months since William left, not just physically but emotionally. At nearly 11, he was shouldering responsibilities that would have seemed impossible for a child his age. He had become Kate's unofficial co-parent, helping to mediate disputes between his younger siblings and offering comfort when Charlotte or Louis were particularly missing their father. "Mummy," George said one evening after putting Louis to bed, "do you think Daddy would be proud of how I'm helping?" Kate looked at her eldest son, seeing so much of William in his serious expression and careful consideration of others. "I think Daddy would be incredibly proud," she said. "But I also want you to remember that you're still a little boy, George. You don't have to take care of everyone all the time." George nodded, but Kate could see that he didn't really believe her. The weight of being the future king, combined with his father's absence, had created a sense of duty in him that was both admirable and heartbreaking. Charlotte had found her own way of coping through creativity. She had started what she called her Daddy Project, a massive art installation that covered one wall of the playroom. Every day she added something new: drawings of family memories, pressed flowers from the garden, photos of special moments, ticket stubs from places they had visited together. It was her way of keeping William present in their daily lives. "When Daddy comes home," she explained to visitors who asked about the wall, "I'm going to show him every single thing we did while he was away. He won't miss anything." Louis had perhaps the most complicated relationship with his father's absence. Some days he seemed to forget that William was gone at all, chattering away about things he would tell Daddy when he got home from work. Other days the reality would hit him with fresh force, and he would dissolve into tears that seemed too big for his small body. Kate had learned to navigate these emotional storms with patience and creativity. She had created a daddy box for Louis, filled with small items that belonged to William: a spare watch, a favorite shirt that still smelled like his cologne, photos from their last vacation. When Louis missed his father most acutely, they would sit together and go through the box, with Kate telling stories about each item. The palace staff had become an extended family during this time. Maria, their nanny, had stepped into an even more crucial role, providing stability and support when Kate was overwhelmed. The cook had learned each child's comfort foods and seemed to intuitively know when someone needed a special treat. Even the security staff had adapted their routines to be more supportive, engaging with the children in small ways that helped fill some of the gaps in their daily lives. But it was the letters from the public that provided the most unexpected source of strength. Hundreds of families wrote to share their own experiences with separation: military families, diplomatic families, anyone who had faced similar challenges. Kate had started reading some of these letters to the children, helping them understand that their experience, while unique in its circumstances, was part of a larger human story about love and resilience. One letter particularly moved them all. It came from a military wife whose husband had been deployed for over a year. She wrote about the night her 5-year-old son had asked if his daddy still loved him, since he had been gone so long. The woman had taken her son outside and pointed to the moon, explaining that no matter where they were in the world, they were all looking at the same moon. And that was how love worked too. It connected people across any distance. That night, Kate and the children had gone out into the garden and looked up at the moon together. Charlotte had immediately decided this would become a nightly ritual, a way of feeling connected to their father no matter how far away he was. "Do you think Daddy is looking at the moon right now?" Louis asked. Kate checked her watch and did the mental calculation. "It might be daytime where Daddy is," she said. "But he's definitely thinking about us just like we're thinking about him." The moon ritual became one of many new traditions the family had created during William's absence. They had breakfast for dinner every Friday because William loved pancakes. They had movie nights where they watched films William had chosen before he left, each child taking turns picking from his selections. They had started a family journal with each member writing or drawing something every day that they would share with William when he returned. Kate documented everything, knowing that William would want to see proof of how they had lived and grown during his absence. She took pictures of the children's daily activities, recorded videos of their conversations, and saved every piece of artwork and school assignment. Their house had become a museum of memories, all waiting to be shared. The hardest moments came unexpectedly. A father and child walking hand in hand in the park could reduce Kate to tears. The sound of an airplane overhead would make the children look up hopefully, wondering if Daddy might be on his way home. School events where other fathers were present created a sharp reminder of what they were missing. But there were beautiful moments too. The night Charlotte learned to ride her bicycle without training wheels, she had insisted on calling William immediately, despite the time difference. William's joy at hearing about his daughter's achievement, even through a crackling international connection, had filled their house with celebration. When George scored the winning goal in his school football match, he had dedicated it to his father during the team celebration. Kate had watched from the sidelines with tears in her eyes, proud of her son's strength and touched by his loyalty to his absent father. These months had taught Kate things about herself she never would have discovered otherwise. She had always been strong, but she had never been solely responsible for everything. The weight of making every decision, handling every crisis, being the only parent present for every important moment. It had pushed her to develop reserves of strength and patience she hadn't known she possessed. But perhaps most importantly, she had learned that love truly doesn't diminish with distance. If anything, the separation had made their family bond stronger, more intentional, more precious. They had stopped taking ordinary moments for granted and had learned to find joy in simple connections across thousands of miles. As they passed the 6-month mark, Kate felt a mixture of pride and exhaustion. They had survived the hardest part, the initial adjustment, the establishment of new routines, the acceptance of their temporary reality. But she also knew they still had a long road ahead, and the challenge now was maintaining their strength and connection for the duration of William's assignment. 18 months had passed like a long, slow season that tested every fiber of their family's strength. Kate stood in the same study where William had first broken the news of his assignment. But this time she held a different piece of paper, confirmation that his duty was complete and he was coming home. The children's reactions to the news reflected how much they had all changed during their father's absence. George, now almost 12, received the information with a maturity that was both impressive and heartbreaking. He simply nodded and asked practical questions about the timeline and security arrangements. The little boy who had cried when his father left had been replaced by a young man who understood duty and sacrifice in ways no child should have to. Charlotte, now 9, burst into tears of pure joy and immediately ran to her Daddy Project wall to add the news. The wall had grown to cover the entire playroom, a massive collage of their life without William that she couldn't wait to share with him. She had never stopped believing in their reunion, and her faith had been a source of strength for the entire family. Louis, now 6, seemed almost confused by the news. His father's absence had lasted nearly a third of his young life, and William had become more of a bedtime story than a daily reality. Kate realized with a pang that Louis would need time to reconnect with his father in person, to remember what it felt like to have Daddy present for ordinary moments. The palace immediately began preparations for William's return, but Kate insisted on keeping the homecoming private and low-key. This reunion belonged to their family, not to the public, and she wanted William to have time to simply be a husband and father before resuming his official duties. In the weeks leading up to his return, the household buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Kate found herself alternating between joy and anxiety. 18 months was a long time. Would they slip back into their old rhythms, or would they all have to learn how to be a complete family again? She worried about the children's expectations. They had built up this reunion in their minds for so long that reality might not match their dreams. George had grown so much that William would barely recognize him. Charlotte had lost 2 teeth and learned to swim. Louis had started school and could now read simple books. They were all different people than they had been when William left. Kate was different too. 18 months of solo parenting had made her more confident, more decisive, more independent than she had been before. She worried that William might feel displaced, that he might struggle to find his role in the family dynamic they had created in his absence. But her worries dissolved the moment she saw him walking up the palace steps. Despite everything they had been through, despite the months of separation and the changes they had all undergone, William looked like home to her. He was thinner than when he left, with new lines around his eyes and gray threading through his hair, but his smile was exactly the same. The children's reactions were everything Kate had hoped for and more. George tried to maintain his new mature composure, but dissolved into tears the moment William hugged him. Charlotte launched herself into her father's arms with such force that he nearly fell backward, and Louis, who had been shy and uncertain in the days leading up to the reunion, took one look at William and whispered, "Daddy." as if he couldn't quite believe it was real. "Yes, little man," William said, kneeling down to Louis's level. "It's Daddy, I'm home." The first few days were a delicate dance of reacquaintance. William was jet-lagged and emotionally overwhelmed, trying to process 18 months of missing memories in a matter of hours. Charlotte insisted on showing him every single addition to her daddy project wall, narrating their entire experience of his absence. With the intensity of a museum curator, George was torn between his new role as the responsible older brother and his desire to simply be a child with his father again. Kate watched William navigate this carefully, acknowledging George's growth and maturity while also giving him permission to just be 11 years old. Louis needed the most time to adjust. He had gotten used to Kate being his primary source of comfort and guidance, and William's presence felt overwhelming at first. Kate had to resist the urge to step in and mediate, allowing father and son to find their way back to each other naturally. The first night William was home, Kate found him in each child's room, just watching them sleep. When she discovered him in Louis's room, tears streaming down his face, she understood the depth of what he had sacrificed for duty. "I miss so much," he whispered. "Louis was barely 3 when I left. Now he's 6, and I don't know his favorite foods or which stories he likes best or what makes him laugh." Kate took his hand. "You'll learn," she said simply. "We have all the time in the world now." And slowly they did learn. William discovered that George had become passionate about astronomy during his absence and could name every constellation. He learned that Charlotte had developed an amazing singing voice and loved to perform concerts for anyone who would listen. He found out that Louis had inherited his love of football and could kick a ball with surprising accuracy for such a small child. But it wasn't just the children who had to readjust. Kate and William had to learn how to be partners again, how to share decisions and responsibilities after 18 months of independence. There were moments of friction as they negotiated new boundaries and roles. "I've been making all the decisions about the children for a year and a half," Kate said during one of their first disagreements about bedtime routines. "It's going to take time for me to remember to consult with you." William understood, but Kate could see the hurt in his eyes when he realized how much their family had functioned without him. It would take time for all of them to find their new equilibrium. The moment that convinced Kate they would be okay came 2 weeks after William's return. Louis had fallen off his bicycle and scraped his knee badly. In the past, Kate would have been the one to comfort him, but this time Louis looked around wildly and called for both parents. "I want Mommy and Daddy," he sobbed, and Kate felt her heart swell as William joined her in comforting their youngest son. This was what she had hoped for, not a return to exactly how things were before, but a new way of being a family that incorporated all the growth and change they had experienced. A month after William's return, the family held a private celebration, not of his homecoming, but of their survival. They had weathered 18 months of separation and emerged stronger, more appreciative of each other, and more aware of how precious their ordinary moments together truly were. "We did it," William said that night as he and Kate sat in their bedroom, listening to the sounds of the children getting ready for bed, sounds he had missed desperately during his absence. "We did," Kate agreed. "All of us." The experience had changed them all permanently. George carried himself with a new confidence and maturity. Charlotte had learned that love could survive any distance. Louis had discovered that families could stretch and change shape but never break. And Kate and William had learned that their bond was strong enough to survive any test. Years later, when people asked Kate about that difficult period, she would say it was both the hardest and most important thing their family had ever been through. It had taught them that love wasn't just about being together, it was about choosing to stay connected even when everything else tried to pull them apart. The goodbye that had once threatened to break them had ultimately made them unbreakable. And in a world where royal duty would continue to make demands on their family, that strength would prove invaluable in all the years that followed.